Hello everybody, welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful. I'm in the studio today continuing work on recycled projects. So I ended up making a playlist for recycled notebooks, journals, and folios because I like working with recycled materials. I may have variations on those categories, and so I thought they'd be easier to find if I put them all in one playlist. So far in this playlist, I will be adding kind of where this started, which was me making these little travel art folios. So if you missed this one, I'll put a link to the playlist so you'll see everything down below. It was made from recycled cracker box and recycled papers. I'm going to add this one to the playlist. Then the next video in this playlist was the one where I took recycled book page and used gesso to make it writable. I have a couple of questions in the comments about my reference to it being smooth. So I'm gonna kind of restate here. This was just my experiment. This was just me playing around trying to figure out what would make the most writable surface. And I came to the conclusion after trying paint was using gesso, and I used the professional grade gesso. There is a basic gesso and there's probably different brands and they may all kind of work differently. But the one that I used that I referred to as being smoother was the professional Liquitex gesso. That's just my own opinion. It may not be smooth enough for you. I also came to the conclusion that I preferred the Sharpie, just regular ultrafine marker to write on this. I tried several different pens. It's all in that video, but that's kind of my own personal preference. If you don't want to use gesso, and like I did, because I thought these could be fun as little art journals and that sort of thing, you don't have to use this. You can use any kind of recycled paper. I, in the past, had made, this was a little book made from recycled materials, and I had all these little short offcuts from working on junk journals. So these were just like little leftover bits. You can use something like, my intention was just to have this be a little notebook that I could throw in my purse. Just to have a little notebook. So I don't really worry about how writable or smooth or anything this is because it's kind of just something I need in a pinch, you know. For those of you who want to do something like this for an actual whole journal or something, I would do a practice thing and just see if you like it. This is just kind of one more way for me to recycle some book page. Then the next video is hand painting junk mail because I want this to all be from recycled materials, and I always like to find ways to use up my junk mail. I did a demo on how I painted these with my jelly plate. I've done similar kind of colorful papers before I even owned a jelly plate. So you can do a similar thing, and I've put a link to that video as well. When I put the paint on for those, I would just like pour paint on and use a credit card, smear it around, a palette knife, anything. So you can do a similar type idea to this without having a jelly plate. I just really enjoy the surprises I get and layering and that sort of thing with the jelly plate. So I'm going to continue on to working on doing my collage now with this paper and just some different ideas I've had even since the first ones that I did. So that's what we're going to work on today. I did also want to point out I wasn't as pleased with these little sales inserts, the thinner paper. Not so much because of the thinness of the paper, but because there's such a busy, lots of stuff going on. It would take so many layers to cover that up. So that's kind of more than the thinness of the paper that I just decided I just didn't like to have to cover that up. It was just going to take a long time. So I have my pile. I ended up, because it had been a little while since I had made this little booklet, and I knew that when I did it, I did several different experiments with the best way because I didn't get this idea from watching another video. I'm sure there are tons out there with these open spines, but I had an idea in my head and was just kind of figuring it out on my own. So I ended up having prepared multiple insides before I knew how I was going to put it all together. So I ended up taking one of these, and I'll end up doing something with this one too, but I ended up doing a different one where my insides are removable. And again, I just used some recycled cardstock. So everything in here was something that was going to get thrown out or, you know, to the recycler. So I wanted to do another experiment doing it with a removable book. So I did that in the last couple of days. And I will kind of show you the differences. I think just for sake of time and working on another book, I'm going to demo this one where the pages are inserted in case you've never done anything like this. As far as how this went together, I would say I kind of took ideas that I had seen on Nick the Booksmith. So if you follow her, she's kind of the expert to me on, you know, bookbinding and all that kind of thing, and I'm definitely not. But this was just kind of trying to play around with an idea. So I've got, you know, the removable one and the not removable one. They're very similar in the beginning stages, and then it kind of, they change how they go together. So, you know, like the old carpenters say, there's more than one way to build a box. So today I'm going to work on this. I've got my papers, and I also had some ideas of different ways to collage these too. So I'm probably going to stop and start here, and I'm not going to get this all finished in one day, I don't think. But my two ideas, one is when I did this cover, I had the idea of doing it everything in horizontal stripes instead of kind of like a random sort of collage. So all the papers, it's kind of hard to tell now because I've layered other mixed media techniques on top of them. They're all just hand-torn strips. After I had done that, then I had the idea to use my tearing rulers and do some neat different edges and alternate them just to kind of give some interest. This one I also did some more mixed media technique on the top of. You don't see that as much because it's kind of an underlayer. On the two little journals that I've done, I didn't do any more mixed media techniques than what the papers already were themselves. So you can kind of see the different edges from the different tail rollers on this. And that's one of the ways that I want to do it. So I'll show you what I use to do that. And then I've had a couple of other ideas. I thought it would be fun to even do like subway tile. So before I tear up all these papers, like I did in the past, I just kind of took all my rejected painted papers and just went ahead and tore them into strips, different width, you know, so that they're just all kind of random. But before I do that with these, I want some with straight lines. I want some hand torn, just in different ways. So I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm going to go over and just cut some strips off of each of these and then just kind of lay out what I'm thinking of. I'm probably not going to actually go and do the gluing of that now. I just want to get some pieces cut. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So for this first idea, what I've done is I've taken a piece of my paper and I decided to cut 3/4 of an inch with my guillotine off of each end so they would be different. So I did that on several papers so that I was getting a variety of color. And so these are my 3/4 inch strip. And you can see I could just lay these out now, you know, and glue them down just in nice, even straight strips and have that be a cover would be really cute. Or what I thought of doing, and I'm not going to glue and do the actual thing because that'll take too long, but what I will do is at the end of this video, I think I'm going to have made some masterboard. I'll do some examples of some different variety and show those at the end. My thought was to then cut these strips into 1-inch pieces and then lay them all out kind of in a pattern like subway tiles. So you can alternate the colors to give yourself lots of contrast so that you really see the different squares. And you'd lay a stripe out one way and then you'd stagger the next row. So you'll have some to trim off, you know, of these edges at the end. But that's just another different little pattern idea. Just grabbing random different pieces. Now I don't have quite enough variety cut here. I think you get the idea. So you just kind of stagger them like a bricklayer would and make a pattern that way. You know, you can do any kind of pattern on your covers. Quilt patterns, if you're a quilter, you may have some really neat quilting designs that you can cut triangles or different things or the star, or, you know, different patterns. It's just a different way to collage than having be random. So that's with cutting lots of straight lines. So I'll put that aside for later. And then the other idea, which is how I originally started, would just be to hand tear a bunch of strips. That is another idea. And then they don't have to be straight, they could be crooked. But again, I would probably go to different papers to get a variety of what you've done with your color and pattern and that sort of thing. So that's another idea. And then just kind of start laying them out there so they're really kind of random. And then after I had done that, I thought, well, this will be much faster if I just use my tear rulers. You can just use, if you don't have fancy tear rulers, you can just use even a regular ruler just to help yourself be able to randomly tear these, and they may not necessarily be straight, but I can kind of lay out on my grid here to see what I'm doing if I want, and just kind of, you know, tear a whole bunch of strips. And again, doing it from different papers, different ends, so that you can get a variety of pieces. So these may not end up being straight if I do it this way, but it's just another way to maybe quickly get a bunch of strips cut. So you can do it that way. Now what I found that I really like to do, if you have like these little different kind of decal scissors, you can do those just to get a different edge. But to me, the fastest way to do this was to use these We Are Memory Keepers. These come in a set of 3, and I'll put a link down below, that have all these different designs that you tear. And I believe this came with a water pen, which makes it easier to tear. And honestly, I can't remember when I got to tearing my other ones, if I really even needed the water. You just kind of hold it down. The other thing I like about this, there's a little kind of slot here in the middle, so you can see, and they're clear, so you can see where you're lining up so that you get the pieces straight, even though they're all kind of torn. Let's see, this is pretty heavy duty paper, so that was a little harder to tear, and I'm not a huge fan of white edges, so you could either, you know, dirty those up before or after with some distress oxides or inks. But I'm going to leave those now, and let's try the same one on the same paper with a water pen and see if that's easier. So let's see on that same one just for kicks. And again, I can kind of line up something that looks straight and then get that wet. So that was a little bit easier. And then you can see I have my strip with an interesting edge. So I'm going to take a few minutes. Let's try some other ones on some. That paper was kind of thick. Let's grab a different one. This is also kind of thick. I love the colors on this one. So let's try this bigger side then. And that's without water, and that tore pretty easily. And then let's do a different edge just for fun. This one maybe. So you see, that's just kind of a fast way to tear all these. So I'm going to tear up some paper, and then I'll come back and we'll start collaging. Okay, I think that's enough for now. So I'm going to put those aside and now kind of work on our first cover. So I went ahead and I took just a recycled box. To prep this, I've shown this before, that you need to prep this surface because this box is kind of shiny. Some of them have a coating, and then the glue doesn't stick. So I'm just using a piece of sandpaper. You can use a sanding block or, you know, a nail buffing block or something, but I'm just going to rough this up. And then I'm just going to clean this off with a dry paper towel so I don't introduce more water than I need to this. Okay, so once you have your covers cut, I want to go ahead, and the other thing I want to do is go ahead and punch my corners. That way I can decoupage over them and then just trim it. I think it's just easier to punch these while they're this thin. So I'm going to use my We Are Memory Keepers punch, and I'm going to use the middle size, which is 7mm. And I'm only going to do 2 outside edges. I'm going to leave the inside or the spine side square. So I'm just going to do those 2. And you can do this or not. You can just cut the corners off in a corner or just leave them square. So I'm just going to get the other one. And I find these are easier. This one's all metal, which is nice. I find them easier to do if looking at it upside down instead of trying to do that, because then I can make sure my card's all the way into the corner. So now I have 2 covers with the open side rounded, and then this side is still squared off. I like to use Mod Podge for this. You can use any kind of decoupage kind of glue that you like. And I need a brush here. And then I like to pour it into just some kind of throwaway container. I use this one kind of over and over again. You can see that I've got some in there from last time. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this. And then you want maybe either the speed ball, something like this, to flatten it out if you have one of these. I use this one only for gluing things, or a credit card is really what I prefer. I have my grungy credit card here. So I'm just going to start randomly putting on these stripes. Oops, already made a mess. So I like these pretty edges, the cut edges, to show and be layered on top of each other. So, you know, you might want to, you know, start at the bottom and work your way up so that you always kind of have a stacked edge, or vice versa, just so you always have you're not covering up your decorative edge, I guess is what I mean. So you can just, I could start with this one because it's a straight edge, but then I like that curvy edge, so I want that behind it, you know, kind of like that. So if I start at the top and work my way down, maybe with one that I don't really like how the edge turned out, like I could put that, that's going to get covered up. Let's see, there were some that I think were kind of crooked, so maybe I'll start with a really crooked one and get that glued down. And you don't have to do, you know, the horizontal stripes like I'm doing. You can do, you know, any kind of design that you like. It can just be random all over scraps. You know, you don't even have to use this. You could have left your papers in one piece and put them down, you know, and not even cut them up if you liked your pattern. How I came to this, if I've not mentioned it before, is I ended up on a project having a bunch of painted papers that I just wasn't thrilled with. They didn't make the cut for my actual project, and so I didn't want to waste them because, you know, I had painted them and I liked them when they were torn up. I didn't necessarily like them when they were all one piece. So you can kind of just, you know, look around and see one that you like up against another one, and, you know, I may overthink it sometimes, but that's kind of the fun of it, you know, just kind of playing around. That's not enough contrast for me, I think. So, ooh, I like that one. I love this color of magenta, but then I have turquoise on turquoise. So maybe I want to, now that looks good. So there's a lot of contrast. I'm not stacking turquoise on turquoise. So I just like to vary it up so that you really see the stripes. I mean, some of them I knew when I did them, I was going to be adding more mixed media techniques on top. So then it's really just background, and you don't, you know, have to really worry about it too much. You can just throw paper down. And see, this one is one of those torn edges that got kind of messed up, but I like the black dots. They kind of have a nice accent on there. You just kind of do this, layer it, go over the top too, get all the bubbles out. I'm leaving these hanging out because I'll just trim them off at the end, and then I'll have all that paper to use, you know, for something else. Maybe not enough contrast. I like how the little dots. The nice thing too is, you know, if you do something and then you're not happy, you want it to have more. One of the things that I had done on those folios is I went ahead and added some stenciling on top of it. So you can do as much or as little as you like. To me, this is just kind of like a way of taking recycled materials and making them maybe look more like art. Now, I did the same big wavy one really close together. I should pick a different tear for the next one just because. So that's a littler wavy, but there's not a lot of contrast. This one's going to have more contrast because it's more like what's up here. This one does too, but it has dots, but I don't like that one as much. I thought I tore a lot of pieces, but now as I'm going through them, I may not have torn enough variety for myself. So maybe that one. So when I tore my papers, I did them, you know, different ends so that I would have different colors. So this is just kind of, to me, you know, a fun thing to do. Sometimes I'm not feeling maybe the most creative with some kind of new idea. And so for some reason, gluing down paper is just really kind of satisfying. And then while I'm doing this, it's kind of methodical and, you know, I don't want to say tedious, that's not the right word, but you know, you're kind of just playing around, and while you're doing that, it helps you kind of come up with other new ideas while you're doing this. So I think maybe that one somewhere. It seems like when I do this, it's just kind of mind calming, and lots of ideas come in those quiet times, you know, when you're just doing something like this. Sometimes it just takes that thing to get you started. Okay, so I have my first little piece, and I just love how that looks. So I'm going to trim these off, and then I want to put a whole coating over the whole thing and let that dry, and I can work on my other one. So you could let this dry and then use your paper trimmer, you know, and get it cut really straight and nice. But I'm going to show you a trick that I do when I cut with scissors, and I'm not perfect. So that step will probably come later. I hope I remember. Okay, so I have my first cover, and I love that. I love all the bright color. I love the waviness to it. This one, I don't even mind the white so much. It kind of highlights a little bit. I'm going to leave that one to dry. It's a good idea to let this dry for a bit before that last coat. And then you can see how I didn't do it straight, but this will be a good thing to show you my little tip before I do my actual cover. So I'm going to work on the other one. I'll speed up the video again so you don't have to listen to me. Okay, so I'm back. What I did yesterday was I went ahead and let these dry under a heavy book, and I had put a nice thick coat of my matte Mod Podge, which is what I used to stick down my papers. Let them dry really well, and now I'll just continue on in the same video because I didn't end the video. The other thing that I wanted to show you, I did some master boards using these papers. I had someone excited about seeing these papers in my Etsy shop. I thought, oh, I better stop before I keep cutting these up and scan all of these. I scanned them in the largest size that I had. Some of them were still 8.5 by 11, so I was able to get, you know, full size ones. Some of them were cut down, not this small, but I have scanned all of those as well. And I'm going to end up probably just collaging those in attractive ways so that I have full 8.5 by 11 digital printables that you can print at home. And then the other thing that I did, because I was playing around with them, is I went ahead and made a couple masterboards. I may make more before this all gets listed. But in the meantime, I just wanted to show you real quickly. I just took some printer paper that I had done test prints or whatever on and collaged. This one was done in the same way that I had done the little covers with the different tear rulers, just to get some different patterns. So this can be cut up into journaling card, backgrounds for other mixed media things that you're going to do, book covers, whatever. So I have this one, and then I went ahead and did one where I had straight pieces, straight lines cut with my guillotine, and then I just laid them out in kind of frames inside of frames inside of frames. I just thought that was kind of another fun, different pattern to show you. And then like I said, I'll do some other things. But I'm going to end up hopefully having a kit in the Etsy shop. Let's get on with this. And I have my covers are all nice and dry. And I am going to do something to the edges here. Now, when I did these other ones, you can see that the color is a little duller. It was a different batch of paper than this for one thing, but it's because I've used something else on this. I may do a little bit on here to show you, and I think you can see this one maybe you can see is a little sparkly and this one is not. After you have done this part, you can either leave them bright, which is what I'm going to do for this one because I haven't done one yet like that, or you can treat it like it was just a background and do more on it. My point is you can have this just be a background and keep adding mixed media layers to it. I had used, you can kind of see there's like a opalescent shimmer to it, and it was this little floral stencil, and this one is by Deco Art Americana. I think this is a brand that's maybe at Michael's. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. I've had this for a long time. But I just used this stencil, and then a fun paint, if you haven't tried it, it didn't really show up on here. It would have shown up maybe with a darker background or more contrast. That it's Folk Art brand, Color Shift paint. It's acrylic paint. It has a metallic finish, glossy finish, and it just kind of has that, just kind of a neat opalescent look. So when it says Color Shift, depending on what color you put it with, it can take on a different colors. So that's kind of a fun one to try if you haven't tried it before. That were these two. This one, like I said, I'm not going to do anything to, but I wanted to point those out in case you were curious of why they look so different. I had trimmed the edges of these just with scissors, and I didn't do a very good job. One thing, I can go back with scissors again and try to clean that up. It's easier to cut once it's dry. I was doing it when it was still wet and gluey, but I'm going to kind of try to get that a little bit better. See if this one is not too bad. And maybe you don't care, you know, just be kind of rough. One of the things, I like to use my fabric on the inside to have frayed edges, and that kind of hides any imperfections too. But the other thing that I like to do is take your sanding block. It's easier than with sandpaper, and just go along that edge and rough that up. It'll kind of sand away that little bit of paper that's still there. And because you're using a block, you're going to get a nice, straight, even edge. Okay, now I know I sped that up, so I wanted to kind of tell you what I was doing. So when I had it this way, I could sand and I could see where the collage papers were proud of the cardboard. So that was kind of my guide to be able to see where I needed to sand and see my cardboard, which I know is a nice straight line. And then I flipped it over and did this on the edge, because when I sand this way, you kind of are pulling paper up a little bit maybe. And so and it might be uneven and rough. So I'm just going to knock all that off. So that does two things. It knocks off any little edge that's sticking up, like right there, and just smooths that. But then I'm also revealing, if you can see, kind of a white edge of the paper. Now, you could leave it like that if you like, but you know, if you've watched me, I'm not a huge fan of white edges. So what I'm going to do instead, clean up my table, is I'm going to ink that edge. Now, that's going to change the color. You know, it'll dull some of the brightness depending on what color I use. And you can use a color. I'm just going to use my old standby vintage photo, just because I like grungy things, and it just gives you that little bit of, I don't know, depth of the color, you know, and just maybe knocks down a little bit of the brightness. So I'm using the Distress Oxide. You can use the ink, either one, whatever you like. This is just usually the one I have on my table all the time. And you can see I just knocked down that white edge. And I tend to like, you know, I like lots of color, but I like it dark and moody kind of. I'm not like a bright pastel-y person. And, you know, everybody's different, but that's just kind of my thing. I just like that extra layer of depth. Now I've put the Mod Podge on already, and so you might be thinking, well, it's going to soak into that cardboard edge, but it's kind of going to just sit on top. It'll dry of that collaged part. So you can see it kind of takes away that, it gives you that little edge. To me, it just kind of adds depth to it. Now, I could have done, like, I could go in these little white if I don't like that. I don't mind them so much on this because I'm going to kind of leave them brighter, but I'm going to go ahead and do this to show you what would happen. Again, I've already Mod Podged it, and if you might be thinking, why didn't you go ahead and knock down those white bits before you Mod Podge. Well, what will happen if I do that, because this is like an ink, if I do this first and then go over it with Mod Podge, you're just going to spread that ink everywhere, which is okay. It's going to give you a different look, but just that's why I'm showing you this way, to do the Mod Podge first. And then what it does too is it kind of will thin out the color, if that makes any sense. You know, this is an oxide, so if you know how these work, you're going to have been introducing something wet to what you've already inked, so it's going to move it around. I've used it in old videos to do like antiquing photos, to get that kind of sepia look over something intentionally. But if you haven't played around with it, you know, I would just be aware. That's why I'm doing this. But you can see how it kind of dirtied that up, which is more me. It's still, you know, it's still brighter than this one. I'm not going to do too much, but it knocked down those white bits. You can see compared. So it's not a huge difference, but to me, adding that one layer of depth makes a difference. So I'm going to go ahead, since I did one, and do this one. Okay, so that's enough of that. But you can see it just knocked down that edge for me, and I like that. It's still bright, again, because I did it after the Mod Podge instead of before, which would have kind of smeared it everywhere, and it would have really dulled out all these bright spots. Because I used the vintage photo, this pink would have been more of an orangey color. The green would have been a much dirtier color. You can kind of see some of the brown in there. Okay, now I have my two book covers ready to go this side. And so I'm going to go ahead now and make my holes. I'm going to use my We Are Memory Keepers bookbinding kit. You don't have to have this. I will show you how you can do it without it, because I didn't have this when I first started either. I'm going to put a link to this down below. I really like using it. It does a couple different things, and I'll just show you really quickly if you haven't been following me along. It comes with this little kit, little felt pouch that has waxed thread, the needles, a little booklet that shows you all different kinds of stitching options that you can do, and the little pokey tool. It comes with everything you need. And so I kind of, because I was a beginner, I saw this and I thought, well, that could be handy. And I do really like it. The way it works is these two little things screw down this clear part. And if you look at this, one side has like a little V trough. I don't know if you could see that on camera, but it has holes in the middle, and then it's kind of a V. And then this side's totally flat and has 3 rows of holes. When you're doing like signatures like this, and I'll show you in a second what I did here, you would put them in the one with the V. And then this part has, if you can see, has that same V on this side, and it's flat on this side. So you would center your signature, and then you can poke your holes. So I'll show you that in a second. But this side is flat. For like all the different decorative Japanese stitches, then you use the flat side. And that's what we're going to use to do our cover. So I want to decide which is going to be my front and which is going to be my back, and which is going to be my top and bottom. Actually, I had a button that I want to use, and I should see which side I like that. I think it's that side. Okay, so this is going to be my front and my top. And it kind of looks like mountains and water and sky. You know, kind of see things and other things. So this is going to be my front. And what I want to do is, there is a little notch here. So you could just butt whatever you have to that notch. And that way you know it's all straight. But I like to center it between the circles. So I'm going to butt it against this edge. There's also an edge here, you can see. So I'm going to butt it to that edge. But then when I put this down, I'm going to kind of just eyeball. I don't have to be perfect, but you'll see they've put a little black circle around alternating circles of the holes. And that's just to keep track of where you are and make it easy. So I'm going to find where I have 2, maybe with a circle around it, and center it so that I know. It's just kind of a eyeballing guide for me. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's close right there. So I've got it centered between 2 holes, and then I'm just going to screw this down. Okay, and I'll show you so you can see. I've got a black hole at the circle there, and then down at that end, so I'm kind of centered between that. And then you just need to decide how many holes that you want. And in this one, I did them kind of, instead of every hole, which looks like it's probably 1/4 of an inch apart, these are probably half. I'm just guessing, but that's what they look like to me. I'm going to do alternating ones. So they're going to be maybe 1/2 inch apart like I did on this. So I'm just going to find, I'll start with this hole here. Now you see that there's 3 lines. That's so that you can do decorative stitching. I'm just going to do a decorative spine, so I'm only going to use this back row of holes. So I'm going to go to this one, and you don't need anything under you because this is kind of thick and there's no hole, so you don't poke through anything. It's just kind of handy. So I've done this one, and then you just keep track, and instead of doing the ones without the circle, just go to the ones with the circle around the hole. And then you know those are, my guessing, 1/2 inch apart. So if you don't have this tool, this just saves you having to measure. I didn't even need a ruler for this. I just centered, eyeballed it, and then punched my holes. So if you don't have this tool, you can use, fold up a towel, something soft, so that when you poke through, you're not hitting your tabletop or your mat. I have this little thing that's just recycled out of a packing material, and I saved a couple of these because they're just perfect for this. You can see where I've punched my holes, but you can just lay and punch through here. Okay, so for this one, I'm just going to put these 2 together instead of marking any holes, and I have my right sides outside, and then I'm just going to go through both of them. Oh, you know what? I'm going to stop myself because this is another little tip trick thing. So you see what happens, and somebody gave me an idea that I hadn't tried. I hate these puncture holes. When you go through the top, you know, it's nice clean, the puncture marks on this side, which I have a fix for that too. But I don't want it on this side. So I think what I'm going to do instead, and hopefully my lines up will still line up, I'm going to risk it and go through this way and hope that my eyeballing center was, I'm going to line it up with that first one that I already made in case I'm a little off. Okay, that way my puncture mark will be on the inside again, and that will get covered up. Now, when I make these puncture marks on something I don't like, I take my, see now they're on this side. I'm going to show you just because this is going to get covered up. I just do that and knock down that color, you know, the white that's going to show through. I just do that. The tip that I was given, it was to take your bone folder and use your bone folder to flatten those out. I mean, it flattens them out, but then it kind of closes them up again. You know, they're just going to, once you poke a needle through there, they're just going to poke through again. I'm not going to worry about it on this because these are going to get covered up with fabric. But if they weren't, which on a lot of things they aren't, then I use my little dauber and just knock down that color. Like say you're stitching with your sewing machine onto like just a journal card. The front's going to look good, but the back side is not. And so I just use this. You can, you know, flatten those out at that point with this and then do this. But it's just a way, those things bug me. They're just little details. Okay, so I have my holes cut in my cover, punched in my cover, and then I can do my fabric part. So I went ahead, just for sake of time, just to be different because it was brighter, I thought, let's just use a fabric would be cute. So I found this fabric scrap that I had, and I just liked the colors together. So I'm going to use that, and I've already torn it to fit. So what I did is I took my covers, and I should point out whatever fabric you pick, one of the nice things about picking this rusted fabric is it's just a grungy plain spine. You don't see anything because this is actually, what you see in the spine is actually the wrong side of the fabric. So on this one, I wanted to pick something that my wrong side of the fabric, it either didn't show through or it was going to be okay what I saw through. This one, I didn't plan it ahead, and I noticed it after, is this had a nice pattern to it already. And because I'm going to do beads and things, this would have been kind of nice if you saw this on the spine side. And I could put a little piece in there, just another little strip. I'm not going to, but I could if I wanted to see that. When I did this one, I didn't lay it out so that it's almost centered, but it wasn't quite. It was going to be off anyway, and I noticed it afterwards. But that was kind of a fun thing if you're going to see a pattern through there to choose a fabric where that matters. What I'm going to be doing though is I'm getting all laid out here weird, is you're going to see this is the inside of my book. So I'm going to see the pretty side and then this back side. But that's going to look okay. I'm not going to mind that. It's just kind of plain. So I went ahead and I laid mine out. You can see on my grid, these are 1/4 inch apart. And so to decide the size of the inside fabric, which I've torn so that the little fringy things stick out, I laid it out so they would be about, if I glue these to the edge, it's about 1/4 inch, might be a little bit more in between. And reason mine is that size is to accommodate the little pages that I have already made. Oops, that's gonna fit inside. So if you have more signatures or yours is thicker, you just want to kind of lay that out, measure it, and then make sure it's going to fit in the space that you leave. So I'll deal with that in a bit. But I've got my fabric here. So all I need to do is glue these down to the edge. And I don't know that I did the other one this way, but it's almost like if I don't do a video, I don't remember what I did, and every time is different. I'm trying to remind myself to use this because I haven't done lampshades in a long time and I don't know what kind of shelf life this has, but it's quick glue. It's from the lamp. I did find this on Amazon, I think, from them. So I'll put a link to that because you can get this glue and it does dry really quick. So what I did before when I used it was to just, I don't want to put it on the fabric side. It's better to put it on the cardboard side, but it just comes in this little squeeze bottle. And I'm just going to get the glue on here. And like I said, this is called quick dry, and it did dry. I'm going to go ahead and do the whole thing since it's small. If I'm doing a larger thing, I just start at one end and then continue down, but this is pretty small, so I'm just going to do the whole thing. And there may be other kinds of glue you may have that you like, but this one works really well. So I'm just going to put this down on my fabric to the edge because I know that's how when I cut this. And then I'm going to flip it over and find my card. I'm getting out of frame here just to make sure I don't have any bubbles. And I don't want to get glue everywhere. See, if I'm smart, and I always forget to put a piece of paper down so I don't have to keep wiping this mat off, but I'm not that smart. Okay, and then this one, same thing. I have my glue. I have my space in between here. Now, one thing I want to mention is this is probably not how Nick the Booksmith would have done this to get this all lined out, I'm guessing, because it maybe was not the most accurate thing for my book. But because my fabric was torn, I know I have a nice straight line. You maybe would have wanted to put a ruler or something straight here to make sure that your top and bottom, because I think mine actually looks a little off, but to make sure that they are lined up correctly. But because I just kind of followed my fabric line, I'm good with this. You can see when you glue this, it kind of, the wet, made it bend again. So when I'm completely finished, I'll want to put this under some heavy books again once it's dry to flatten it all out again. Okay, so at this point now, the next thing, I have to keep looking at this because I don't remember what I did, is I want to stitch around this on my sewing machine, around my covers, just for that extra little detail. Now, one thing that I didn't do, and I didn't do it intentionally because I decided this morning I was not going to sew this button on. I was going to just glue it on. If you wanted to do a closure on this, and I thought about doing, when I found this button, I thought about doing just like a little elastic, one little loop, as a closure. But I mostly just wanted the button on there because I thought it was cute. I don't really need it to have a closure. So I'm just going to glue it on. I think when I pick out what thread I'm going to use for the binding, I'll just tie a piece through there, cute like, so that it has a piece of thread like it's sewn on, but it's not. The reason I mention it is if you are going to do a closure or anything on yours, you might want to do that before you put this inside fabric, and then that way, if there's, your threads where you sewed it on, if you don't want to see them out here, they'll be under the fabric. So I only mention it for that reason. Same here is I could have, put an eyelet here and here, and done the button like I did on, well, actually I did use one of them on here, like I did that on that one. But I decided I didn't really need a closure on here. I just kind of like that button. Anyway, so I've got that. I'm going to go stitch. I'll be right back. Okay, now I have mentioned this before as well, is if you are not practiced at sewing, you don't want to sew, you don't have to do this part obviously, but if you don't feel confident about sewing a straight line, then one thing, I did it just a single straight line on this one, and I actually had a little hang up over here. If you don't feel confident in stitching a straight line, then what I suggest is do 2 or 3 wobbly lines on purpose, and that is just gives it a nice grungy look too, and then you don't have to worry about whether or not you can sew a straight line. And I just like, you know, grungy things are very forgiving for that reason. So I have inside fabric on, and again, if this were paper and I didn't like these perforated holes, they don't really show up on fabric like they do on paper, I would go over that with my little dauber. The other thing I could do on this, I'm not going to, but I'm just giving you all the different ideas in my head. I have done this in the past on something like this one, is if you want to dirty up your edges, your frayed edges, you know, use your ink on that too, and that just gives it a really nice little, you know, kind of grungy look too. So I'm not going to do it on this one because I'm happy with, that's just another little idea. Okay, now the next part, the cover I think is pretty much done, except for putting my button on, which I'll decide at the end, I guess. The way I'm going to put this in, I decided instead of using my scrim that I would use just kind of a different coordinating fabric. I thought that would be kind of cute since I'm going to make mine where you can see it. There's a couple ways to do this. So I am going to go ahead and put these to this, sewing them on. And that way I know these are sewn on really well, and then glue the whole thing down and then sew my spine. Oh, for this, I cut this is probably just over 2 inches wide by the height of my book. If your pages, see it kind of is a little bit bigger than my pages. When I cut these pages, I cut them to my cover, and I just took the book pages and I folded them in half, and I took three pages together. And when I did them, of course, they weren't all lined up. If you take, I'm going to show this in case you've never done this before. If you take 3 pages and you fold them in half, when you put them inside of each other, your top and bottom edge are going to be fine, but the more pages you have in, they're not even this way. So put your pages however many you're going to put together. I did in this one, just because of the number of pieces I had already painted, I think I did 3 book pages folded in half, and then I did 3. I think on the other ones, I think I did 4 pages in each one, and then 3. You can do as many as you want. You could do one signature, and then that will be really easy with however many pages you need in it. I just kind of like the way that this all sits kind of more flat. If I had something this thick, this many pages in one signature, it's just going to lay different. So that's kind of why I did that. So you're going to take your 3 pieces, and then once you have them together, then trim those together as a unit. So I ended up taking those pages and measuring my book, which is, my booklet is 3.5 wide, I think by 5, yes. So then I want this to have 1/8 of an inch all the way around my book, but I'm gonna butt it right into my spine. When I laid it out, I'm just gonna go right into the spine and then knock off. So that ended up being 3 3/8. I just took off 1/8 from this edge, and then that evened up all those papers. And then I took a 1/4 inch off of this whole thing. So I took 1/8 off of each end, depending on how you want it laid out. This had kind of a trashy end where they were torn out. So I had to find that and then go to my, what ended up being 4 3/4. So I ended up 4 3/4 by 3 3/8 for my paper sizes. Okay. So I've done those, cut those. I did the gesso ahead of time, so it would be easier than the last ones where I did them after. This way they could get nice and dry and flattened out under books and all of that. So those are just gonna fit in there. And then that way I just have this nice little edge all the way around. So I need to stitch these. You could stitch these together, and I think I stitched these together first and then just used the center one and stitched it into here. Or you can stitch each one individually into here. So maybe I'll just try that. I'm gonna find, I need to get a needle and threads. Okay, so you can use embroidery thread if you have. You could use wax thread. This is the wax thread that came with the little kit. And I'm not gonna, this is pretty thick for this little book. I don't really need it to be that thick. But this is great for book binding, like a real book. The other ones I kind of like to use are just button craft or upholstery thread. It's stronger than just regular all-purpose thread. And I just grabbed this one because it's the closest thing I had to white. So I'm going to use, and I probably just need, you know, enough to tie. And then a needle. For this, I don't really need a huge needle. I'm just going to grab one of these embroidery needles I just got. Since I'm doing the slow stitching, I've been kind of stocking up on my embroidery things. So I think I'll start with whatever I want the center one to be first. Just, that's easier to find the center. And I think I'm going to tie it on the outside because I won't see that. So I'm just going to eyeball to try to find the center. It would be smart to maybe draw a line. So that's pretty good. So I think I'm going to do that just for kicks so I know where I'm at. Oops. Okay, so I've drawn a line in the center. I have my needle and thread. I'm just using button craft thread for this one. And I think what I might do is I'd kind of like that to be stuck down so it doesn't move around where it is, where it needs to be. So I think I'm going to try using, I'm just going to put some stickiness on this. Just because I want a little overhang. That way I know my center line is there pretty close enough for me. And I have my little bit of overhang top and bottom. And then I think it's easier if I go through and I poke all my hole, oops, it came off. If I poke my holes all the way through, and that way I'll be able to see where I need to come in from the other side. Okay, so I have holes. That one's not very good. Okay, now I can, you can start in the middle or one end, whatever you want. I'm gonna start here. And remember to hold my thread so I don't go through. And then I'm gonna go up. Don't let that go through. And down. And then just back through again. So each side and each completes that stitch on both sides. And then go down this way, down to the bottom. So just a simple stitch, and you can do 2 and just call it good, or you can do 3. I did 5, doesn't really matter. And then just tie that off. Okay, so I have one in there that's sewn in so that it's, I know it's not going to come off. So I've got that one. I need to do the other 2 the same way. I still have a little bit of stickiness there. Find the center. I need more thread. So to measure your thread, which I didn't even do that one, so hopefully I got enough. You want to do, you know, you're going to be going twice. So you want it to be at least 2, and then I do maybe a third, just to have plenty of room to tie. Better too much than not enough. Okay, so I have stitched my 3 things onto here. Not perfect, but it will work. Like I said, every time I do something like this, I haven't done it enough to remember from one time to the next. So don't know if that's how you're supposed to do it, but it worked. I did like having a little bit of stickiness on there to kind of keep that where I needed it. Next, I want to go ahead and put my booklet inside my book, and I want it fit all the way back in there, and then I just need a little glue here and here, and then you'll see my stitching. So I could do it where I hide my stitching, and I didn't try it on there, so I'm kind of half tempted maybe to do it the other way, but I don't like that. I like this to be in there when I'm stitching, I think. So I think I'll use this one again, and I'm just gonna start, I think, with a little bit here. Not too much. So if that's enough to hold it, I could do my stitching and then glue these down to hide it. I think I might do that. I think just to try it a different way, and that's how I figure out my favorite way, and at least this time I have it on video. So I'm gonna let that sit for just a minute. It dries quick. And so while that's drying enough, I am gonna try to do that and then hide my stitching. I think what I wanna do is I'm gonna poke through these holes, pick out what kind of floss I wanna use. Okay, so now I can see my little holes, and this is quick glue, so it's actually dried pretty good. So I kind of like that idea that you could hide your stitching, or you could go ahead and glue all that down and then, you know, have it show. Hopefully whatever color I pick, which it may show through anyway, because I have a feeling I'm gonna pick something bold. So for the other ones, I used this one. And I kind of liked it. I don't know if I like it with this as much, because I was almost thinking like a turquoise or a pink or something, which I'm not usually a pink person, but Cindy's probably out there going, purple, use purple. I just thought it was funny when you put that in there. I'm always wondering what people are saying, what color to pick. When I'm giving you the option, you might say, oh, I kind of like that. My first one. Usually it's your first gut is the right one. I have some similar. This one has a little more green in it. And that one's a little lighter. That's in my button. That might look good. Kind of liked that one though. Let's see. Oh, that looks good. Okay, that one, because it looks good with the button. I'm going to use all 6 strands, I think. And this one takes a little bit more because you're crisscrossing and you're going back and forth underneath, if that makes any sense. So I want to do plenty of this. I'd rather have extra and use it for something else. Now, the one thing about the needle when you're going to do with beads like this, how do they look with my button? They look okay. I'm going to use these, I think, just because I like them, and I think they'll be okay with this. But I went through, because not all of them have the right size hole, is you want to make sure that your hole is big enough. You can't use too big of an eye on your needle. You need it big enough for the 6 strands to fit through, but you need it to go through your bead not only once but twice with all this on there. So hopefully I've picked out enough beads with a big enough hole. So how's this gonna look through there when I glue that down? You'll see it, but not much. Okay, what I'm gonna do is pick a place to start. I'm gonna start just at the top of one end. The other thing you could do before I start here is sometimes on previous journals, I have left like a tassel dangly thing with beads on the front. If you're gonna do that, you wanna put it wherever you want that tassel to be. Maybe you want it down here, but I usually put them up here. So that's where you want to tie off your your journal. On these, I just did it inside. So this one's going to be buried, so I'm definitely going to do it inside. So I'm just going to start at the top and leave a little bit so that you can tie it. And then you're going to kind of do it like a shoelace sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and put one bead on now. And then instead of going straight across, I'm going to go down one hole. And then you want to make sure your book is, you know, how it's going to be closed so that you have it the tightness that you want. On this one, I'm going to go down through the next hole. Now on the one where I had the book be removable, I decided to do that different. I have to decide if I'm going to like that turquoise before I get too far. It'll be okay. I really like this color combination. On the one where I did it removable, I had my stitches, instead of going down, I knew that this was coming in and out. I thought it would look fun to do it this direction. So there's two going across. So that was just, you know, more than one way to build a box. So I've gone down. Now I want to go back up to that hole where I go up one again. So you're kind of just going diagonally, and then we'll come back up the other direction after we've gone one whole way. And then every time you just want to make sure you remember to put your bead on. So then I'm going to go down one more. And put a bead on. And then go across and again down to the next one. Now this top one keeps getting loose because it's not tied off, so I want to make sure not to pull it too much. I can tighten it up at the end, but I'm just going to continue that way all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see you're kind of going to be alternating, but then when we come back up the other way, we'll fill that in. So I'm going to speed this up again so you don't have to watch this till I get to the other side. Okay, now I've gone all the way down one side, and now I need to start going back up and doing my crisscrosses. So you just want to kind of make sure when your book is closed that your tension is good, that your beads are in the middle. They kind of move until you get this other side going. So I have left off where? Down here. So now I need to go in this hole. And this is where I'm going to hope all my beads are the right size. So I'm going to end up filling in between all of these. But now I need to crisscross because I still have this bottom hole I haven't gone in. So I'm going to crisscross. This is where having this video will be good for me, because every time I do something like this is bugging me. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, because I'm still, you know, as I remind everyone, I am still new to this. And just learning as I go and sharing what I learn. So be gentle in your comments. Okay, so I've gone in that one. Now I'm going to go up here because I've literally only done 2 of these books. This is my 3rd. And the other one, the first one, was a long time ago. Okay, so I'm going back through the bead. And that kind of gets all your tension. See how my beads are all wandering, but they'll get lined up once I get my crisscross done. And you have to keep it closed, you know, kind of keep checking, because when it's open, you know, they're all more loose. So now I've crisscrossed, and now I'm gonna go back up to this hole, just like you're doing a braid or lacing up shoes kind of thing. Okay, I've got all of my beads centered up nicely. Before I tie this off, because I didn't glue this in first, and now that I see how pretty that color is, I kind of wish I was seeing it on the outside. That's just me. I'll have to do another one. Oh darn. I want to make sure that I have all the room that I want there. So I think it will be good. I think I'm tight enough. Tie this off. Just double checking before I get it completely tight. One more time. Okay. Spine is all sewn in. So now I just need to glue down these flaps and it'll cover that up. So I am kind of wishing now that I did that, because I just love the turquoise color, that I was going to be seeing that through there, but I'm covering it up now. So I'm going to go ahead and glue those down real quick. All finished. So I've done it different ways. Now I need my little button that I really like, and I want to put a little bit of thread in that. And I want to leave a little thread hanging out. I did it from the top because I want that to be there. Actually, you know, it would be really cute. I'm doing the slow stitching thing, and there's turkey work where you can make it like little fluffy pom-pom kind of thing. And that would have been cute to actually do multiple of these and make it like a little tassel-y pom-pom kind of thing. But I'm just kind of separating my threads here. There, that looks cute. So I think I will use my art glitter glue to glue this down. Even though I should probably use my quick glue. That works just to see how it works. It's for dissimilar surfaces, so I'm gonna try it just because. I might find out. I just like that it dries so fast, which is really nice. Art glitter glue dries pretty quick too though, and strong. Okay, there she is, my cute little notebook. We'll see how fast that dries. I may end up having to use the art glitter. I'll put a note in the description if I do, but we'll see how that works. Okay, so now I have variations on my little notebook. I've got the one I just did with the turquoise and glued down, hiding my stitching. And then I have my one where I went this way with my removable book. And this one, again, I used just a scrap of cardstock. I had already sewn these to each other, so I just used the center one and stitched again and stitched it to this. So it's in there, and I think I put some glue in there. So that way I have a removable book. And obviously the thing that I didn't mention is you need these little tabs, which to make these, I just used the same box. I just used the strips that you cut off, the narrow edges, the flaps, that kind of stuff. You can just use that and make your little flaps. And then I did the one, this was the first one I did that I didn't remember how I did. I used scrim. I think I had stitched these all together already, glued them in and stitched them to the scrim, and then glued them into the book, and then did my stitching where you see the exposed stitching, which again, I kind of like that too. Different ideas. Let me know if you come up with your own idea. This is me just playing around and sharing what I'm figuring out. So for all you experienced makers, be kind. I'm still new to this and learning, and I know there are a lot of, there's probably other tutorials out there and that kind of thing, but this was just me playing in my studio. So I hope that if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, leave comments, and I will see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. Go make something. Bye.